so I'm going to go ahead and start that. So I just wanted to let everyone know. Whoever's next, take it away.
I'll go next. So hi, this is Renee. I came to DePaul as a psych major, did my bachelor's in psychology. I knew I wanted to work with people, to help young people in particular, and I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to do that. And at that time, DePaul didn't offer social work. I was thinking of going on for a graduate degree in psychology and kind of had a little bit of an epiphany. Actually, back then we applied with paper, and was walking my graduate application to a mailbox and literally like had this little smack upside the head saying, oh, I don't think that's the right path for you. And so went back to the drawing board and ended up doing a master's in social work elsewhere, again, because DePaul didn't have it at that time. So I've always been in the nonprofit sector up until just recently I've kind of joked that the students that I've worked with have gotten older as I have. So someday I'm going to be doing college access with like a geriatric population or something. I don't know. But I started right after graduation at St. Vincent de Paul Center over on Halsted, actually working with 2.5-year-olds. Favorite job in the world, loved it. But it was part-time, so I had to go. And then got into mentoring, and then mentoring with a college prep focus, and then directed college readiness and retention programs for about 10 years, and then moved on to a university campus, worked right up the street at North Park on Foster Avenue, up until this past January. And then came over to Illinois Student Assistance Commission. But the common thread has always been working with young people to help them toward their educational goals. And so that's the work that I do now. My story in a nutshell.
Great, thank you.
I can go. Again, this is Kevin Feliceman. Sorry about the video issues. So I went to school in Washington, D.C., and during my time in school there, I was really passionate about pursuing a career committed to supporting others, especially young people. I was really enjoyed the experiences I had of working with people that were younger than me and then might need some support or mentorship. And I found out about this year-long program in Chicago called MercyWorks, which is what I recruit for now. And I thought I'd give it a shot, go to a new city, and see how I liked it. I fell in love with the city of Chicago and really enjoyed working for my agency and working with the kids that we serve. And so I have been doing that in a few different roles at Mercy Home for the last 6 years. And currently I am finishing up my MBA at DePaul. So I'm excited to be getting that done. And I'm hoping to pursue using that degree to focus on economic development in low-income communities in Chicago.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Niassa. So my story is pretty short, actually. I graduated from the University of Iowa, and I went into Peace Corps, where I served for 3 years. Typically, our stint is 2 years, but I served for 3, first in the education sector as an English teacher to high school freshmen and juniors. And then I really loved the grassroots level work, but was interested in the bird's eye view. So my 3rd year was spent working with USAID, coordinating one of their programs at the district level. So I was working with different NGOs who were implementing this program that they were working on with adolescent girls and young women. Upon my return to the US, I got to work with a great nonprofit that worked with early childhood education as a program coordinator. But I absolutely love my Peace Corps service. So I was like, I talk about it so much that my friends are over it. I might as well get paid to do it. So I became a recruiter. So I've been recruiting for Peace Corps and being able to inspire others to serve.
So this is Emily from the Red Cross. I had a kind of non-traditional trajectory to where I am now. I went to school in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, at a school called Bucknell, where I was recruited for track and field and had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. So obviously I went into business because what else do you do? So from there, I graduated. I actually got a job in fashion in New York City. I worked in fashion for 7 years before moving to Chicago about a year and a half ago. From there, I saw it as a clean start, try something new. There's not really fashion in Chicago, so looked into a little bit of sales and educational technology. I liked ed tech more, and it was because I liked helping people. I have a pretty robust volunteer background. I'm very passionate about puppies, so service dogs, and also ALS. My mother actually has ALS, so it's something that's near and dear. So putting together that I was enjoying helping people with educational technology, as well as my involvement with these other organizations in the past, really led me to look for something in the nonprofit sector. And I thought that the Red Cross was an incredible fit just because of all the different ways that they impact. You know, there's really, we narrowed it down to 6 lines of service, helping everything from veterans to blood needs in the community, but it really is so much more than that. And it's been a great learning opportunity for someone that is just passionate about helping people.
Great, thank you guys. I don't know about the students, but that's very, useful to hear, especially for the ones that maybe weren't so direct. I know we always tell students and alumni, just because you get this degree doesn't mean you're going to be doing that as a job, and it's okay to kind of explore around. So that's great to hear that most of you had similar experiences. All right, so we'll go on to the second question. What advice would you give to any student or an alumni looking to have a career in nonprofit in general, or your organization, or both? And again, we can go in whatever order. Not everyone has to answer. If you don't have an answer, that's totally fine. But yeah, what advice would you give a student or alumni looking to work in your field?
I'll start off since I finished the last one, but just volunteer. Honestly, I think that's the easiest way to get into any of these fields. One, you're going to get your networking opportunities right off the bat, but then also you're going to see if you like it, because you don't have to necessarily like the first thing that you get. And so I would highly recommend just really figuring out like what you're passionate about, what is going to be something that you're going to get out of bed and either walk to the dining room table or maybe to an office someday, but something that you're going to be really excited to contribute to.
For me, it was funny, the reactions that I got when I was at DePaul, and people would learn, other people, not my classmates, well, sometimes my classmates, but when people would hear my plan, like, oh yeah, I want to go to grad school and be a psychologist, people would say stuff like, oh, you're going to make the big bucks, right? Charge big hourly fees and all that kind of stuff. And when I changed and decided to go on for a master's in social work, the reaction was just the opposite. Oh, you want to stay broke all your life, right? So my advice would be the mindset that I had at that time and continue to have is success will come when you find the work you're built for, right? So don't worry so much about, how linear your path is, or, the financial future of your career. Do what you care about, because that's what you're going to be best at. That's what you're going to be recognized for. And the success will come because you're doing a good job, because you care.
I would agree with that. I used to get the same reaction initially when people knew that I was trying to go into social work right after school. I went to Northern Illinois University, and when I landed a job immediately in social work, people were congratulatory, but then it was always the question of, well, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do next? And I'm ashamed to say I bit the bullet and ventured out into the profit world because I was curious, and I was curious about other industries, but something has led me back ultimately to the nonprofit sector. It is a different type of work, not that the other jobs aren't important, but if you find something that you're truly passionate about, your success will come. You will, it won't seem as much like work for you, because you'll be passionate about it, you'll really care about the causes or the mission, and you will find other ways to supplement the areas where you need it.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is Niassa from Peace Corps. I completely agree with what everyone has really said. I think for me, understanding the idea that like Renee said, progress isn't linear, success isn't linear, and really the beauty of the nonprofit world is that there are so many different nonprofits that you can try. So don't feel like times have changed where we're not committing to like one nonprofit for 30 years. We're able to say like, I'm interested in education, but like what age ranges? Like I worked for like early childhood education. I was like, I love birth to 5, but like that's not where my heart is. And when I was international working with nonprofits, I was like, okay, 15 to 24 was really the age range I really liked. So knowing like there are just so many different nonprofits and so many different experiences that can be valuable, don't be afraid to explore as you're in this field, because you will eventually find the nonprofit that you do feel passionate about. And many nonprofits, like they thrive off of that passion. Like that's what propels them forward, you mixing like your purpose with passion.
Great advice. Any other thoughts or pieces of advice that you'd offer?
I was going to ask a question, because you talked about working in the nonprofit world and not working like 30 years. Well, I've been in nonprofit work in the early childhood industry for, I would say about 40 years, but I've worked in different capacities. So even though I'm in nonprofit, I'm in early childhood, I've been a preschool teacher, a toddler teacher. I've worked as a family support worker in the social service department. And now I manage the birth through 5 teachers. So even though I've been in this field a long time, I have refocused my passion. Whereas before, my passion was working with the children, being down on the floor, doing things that I needed work for them. Now it's geared towards more helping teachers to understand that same passion and how to work with families and children. So it's gone from children to adults, but even working with adults, it still brings it back around to being child focused.
Great thoughts. Right, we can go ahead and move on to the next question that we have for our guests. What hard and or soft skills are expected for an employee to have in your organization? Or maybe like 1 or 2 top ones that you would, encourage someone to maybe gain if they're looking for employment in your fields.
I can take this first. Okay, I would say adaptability, coachability are key. Willingness to learn and train and not come in like we all want to rule the world, but also being coachable in how we rule the world in this organization is important. And then basic stuff like reliability and organization. The technical stuff, you can be taught that. You can be taught how to record keep in each organization, right? You can be taught those kinds of technical aspects. It's the interpersonal stuff and like I said, that reliability and organization that employers aren't going to teach you those. You have to come to the table with those.
Yeah, and I would add to that, working at where we work at a therapeutic residential facility for youth, being able to build relationships is really, really important. And not only for our kids, which is the absolute foundation, but also with your coworkers. So that can apply with all the folks that are speaking today and any job that you'll ever have. Like, how are you at building relationships, getting to know people, adding to the culture of where you're going? I think that's critically important. And to your point, it's like you'll learn all the technical stuff. That's almost in a sense sometimes easier. I think those skills of just being able to build relationships, be kind, being compassionate, and creating, adding to that work culture is so important that if you can work on that stuff now, you'll be so much more of an asset in the marketplace when you're looking for a job and wanting to, you know, find that dream job of yours.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that. I would also say that if you have the ability to problem solve and really understand how to come in and assess and identify problems and be willing to roll up your sleeves to help solve the problems, that makes you a huge asset. A lot of organizations have a lot that we want to do, and a lot of it is very aggressive and aspirational, and we want to do so much, but we can't quite figure out how to do it sometimes and how to do it efficiently. And so any way you can come in and problem solve and help be a part of the solution is going to make you a much more valuable asset.
Just to tack on to that, specifically for our agency, cross-cultural competency is really important, and not only because we're international, but it's a skill that you'll take into any job, since you'll be working with people from different backgrounds, no matter where you are in life or what organization or what agency you work for. Having cross-cultural competency is super important, but also communication. It's like the most important skill, like written communication, verbal communication. It like really kind of helps your employer know like how you work, but also like what you bring to the table, and flexibility. I think we have very, like, especially right now, like I think many different agencies are looking for, or nonprofits are looking for people who show flexibility, but like have that willingness to like move forward and be adaptable. So I would say those three are also really important.
Right, that's great. I know a lot of you mentioned, it sounds a lot like pretty much soft skills. So things that they might not necessarily learn, you know, Word or whatever the program is. How would you maybe advise them to get those soft skills if maybe they don't know how to communicate well, or they haven't had that experience in maybe a professional setting? How would you recommend them kind of get that?
That volunteering, I think it was Emily that mentioned that. Get out there, expose yourself to different kinds of people and issues and types of work. Any kind of experience is experience. So the more you can volunteer and get involved with things, and just, I think volunteering is a great kind of snapshot of what working in any given organization will look like. So, if you have interest in working in a certain kind of field or with a certain kind of population, look for opportunities to start exposing yourself to that environment by volunteering.
And even your participation in an organization is really important. Like a student org gives you a lot of those skill sets, especially if you're in a leadership position. Like if you're in women in STEM or something, like anything like that will help you collaborate with other people. You're collaborating with professors, you're collaborating with other students, you're collaborating with different people from different areas. So it'll build upon so many different skills simply by being in a student org. So get involved. I think that's a huge thing.
I would definitely try and practice giving and receiving feedback as well, especially when you start in a new role. Sometimes it can really hurt to hear like, ooh, maybe not quite like that. But it's all meant to really build you into a better person and a better asset to the team. So, even if it's just like with your mom or dad being like, I wanted to tell you this, that, or the other, it doesn't have to be real. You can just practice having hard conversations or hearing that feedback that you could be better in this way or the other. And with that, just kind of the humility that goes along with it, knowing that you're coming in brand new, and also that everyone around you wants to see you succeed. So I think that is always a really easy way to start to practice that communication skills, building up. And then, because a lot of what meetings are bouncing ideas off each other, but also giving feedback and problem solving as well.
Great, thank you. So we don't have to, talk about COVID for too long, but I think it is a topic of since it's so, it's impacting everyone, I think we'd like to hear your feedback and what you're kind of seeing. So jumping down to number 5, what trends are you seeing in the nonprofit industry, whether it's hiring or funding or, new skills that people might need coming in, like technology, if that's heightened or something along those lines? What skills are you seeing, or what trends are you seeing with the COVID pandemic?
I can jump in here. I think I can speak for our organization. We have had to put a freeze currently on hiring just because of the nature of the pandemic and what's happening temporarily, just right now, just giving us an opportunity to assess the organization and our needs at the moment. I also, we can already see that COVID is impacting how people give. So right now, COVID giving and the fund that we've helped establish with the trust has been a focal point, but after the fund or after COVID goes away, we would like people to still be able to give. And right now we're not sure if people are still going to be able. So we are having to adjust our strategy to address how we tackle that. We have agency partners that we work with that depend on the donations that come in. So having to relook at that and reevaluate and adjust how we do our work because of the pandemic is going to be make for a very interesting next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, similar with Mercy Home, we've had to, put a freeze on all hiring and really, try to think differently about how we're going to approach the coming months with the uncertainty, because there's a lot of different, possibilities. And we also, we want to continue to do the work we do, but also ensure that we're creating a safe environment for our coworkers, for our kids and families. So currently, we are not hiring, which really stinks. And we actually had to shut down the MercyWorks program for the upcoming year. So it's going to be pretty quiet at Mercy Home for a while. And I assume a lot of nonprofits will experience that. But, rest assured that, in 3-4 months, as things hopefully continue to improve and we shelter at home, things will change. But we're just going to have to be patient.
On the flip side, I'm seeing a little bit of, I'm seeing a fair amount of creativity. And I think creativity and problem solving really go hand in hand, back to that previous question about skills. But being able to look at a scenario and problem solve from different angles is what I'm referring to in creativity. I'm seeing nonprofits doing, fundraising in new and different ways, doing more online events. The work that we do at ISAC, we've had to do differently because we can't walk into school buildings and serve students that way. And in this way, I think it's a benefit to all the traditional age college students that grew up with so much technology, right? It's a little harder for 50 and 60-year-olds, I'm in that bucket, to adapt to all the technology. It's a learning curve for some people, but for our current college students, it's everyday life, right? And so I think that plays well to who you are and some of the skills that you bring to the table. But yeah, I'm seeing nonprofits having to strategize around fundraising in a different way and coming up with some kind of unique methods of doing it.
As part of a disaster organization, it's not that the work is stopping, it's just that we look a little different when we show up. We're also on a hiring freeze. However, 90% of our organization is volunteers, and we can always use a helping hand. And then, the other things that we're encouraging is also just blood donation, especially with the convalescent plasma for COVID patients. We are working with the FDA on that, and it's really interesting, just kind of to mirror what Renee was saying, that we're pushing ourselves in ways that we probably would have gotten to eventually, but definitely not quite this quick, and definitely with not quite as much of an impact, I think, because we're all at home. So, you know, it's a really great time to reach other people and share your mission and how you can help.
Any other thoughts or trends we're seeing? It sounds like two of you are kind of in similar boats, but that's great to hear, Renee, especially about the problem solving. So that might be, you know, something for students that are looking for jobs, or alumni looking for jobs in these types of fields for the future, to maybe highlight those problem solving skills on your resume or in your interview and those sorts of things. That could be definitely some good advice for the future regarding all of this. This next question, do we have any upcoming grads or recent grads in the room? Maybe, okay, a few, cool. I didn't want to ask it if there weren't any, but what advice would you give to the class of 2020 or recent grads about everything? You know, what advice would you give them right now?
I can go. I think you know, it's to be honest, like I said before, it's a difficult time, and I don't think there's a need to sugarcoat it. Like, we are in a challenging time as a country and as a world. So to be honest, I think the most important part is to, you know, just continue to explore options, see what you can do in these next few months. Things will open up and they will get better, but I guess my best advice, because I've never experienced this either, we're all new to it, is just to take advantage of the time you have now to develop those skills, to take some of the advice that people on the panel have given to help make sure that when it is time and you do have that opportunity, that you're ready to go. And just stay hopeful, because I think in times like these, it's easy to kind of sit in the tough parts, or go into places where you think, oh man, this is never going to change. But staying hopeful and taking advantage of this time to develop your skills and get ready for whatever is next. And networking too. Like, if you take advantage of going on LinkedIn, like, I don't know about other folks, but I'm always on that. And if people want to connect or reach out or message me to whatever extent I can help, I'm more than willing to do that, whether we do a Zoom chat or they just connect with me, because when the agency turns around and they want to work at Mercy Home, I'd be more than willing to help out. So I think doing those things, staying hopeful, developing those skill sets as much as you can, and then virtually networking as much as you can.
I would say also to be open to the opportunities that do come, because it's a tough job market. You might not get exactly what you're looking for, but can you find something that you can think of as a stepping stone, right? Just to get a foot in the door. Again, like I said earlier, that success will come if you're just patient and you do the role that you're in well. You'll be able to transition when things get better.
To piggyback on Renee's statement, I was going to say the same. Be willing to look outside of what you may have as your dream job right out of school. You may have to take something that's temporary or part-time that can just get your foot in the door with the organization. Help them to meet who you are. Help them to see those great skills that you've been working on. And even when your assignment ends, you'll be somebody that's in the pipeline that we can call on later, because we remembered what such an impact that you made at the time that you were with us.
I have a question. Do you foresee there being a lot more flexibility in maybe your roles, in addition to the way that work is structured for you going forward? And that kind of applies to everybody.
For me, so again, I work at a state agency, and so this is something that's been a constant conversation during this shelter-in-place time, because there's two different, what I'm seeing in my agency anyway, there's two different kind of pools of thinking. There are some folks that are very traditional and want to see things get kind of back to quote unquote normal, right? Life as it's been. And then there's another camp that's saying, hey, you know, maybe this is a good strategy in a longer term way. So I'm seeing a mix of responses in that way. My gut personally is I think this pandemic is going to change life as we know it in general. I think there is going to be a realization from some places that, hey, maybe we don't have to have so much money put out every month with overhead, right? Maybe we can operate a little bit differently with some more telecommuting and things like that. But I think it varies place to place.
I would agree with that. I think, you know, we've proven as a society that we can work from home effectively. So I don't think that it's ever going to be necessarily a question of why you're working from home, because we've all proven ourselves that we're able to do so effectively. And with that, I think, you know, Renee hit it right on the head with there's some costs that maybe we never considered cutting, and we can put that money towards a better use or a bigger workforce, or you know, better talent that isn't necessarily in the state or in the city, but somewhere where they're just the best and brightest. So I'm looking forward to seeing what innovations come out of this, because I think it's going to make for a really competitive and skilled set of, you know, graduates and the next generation.
And I think the nonprofit sector, since that's the purpose of this conversation today, I think the nonprofit sector is, you know, by nature, we have to keep an eye on costs, right? And so I think this sector is probably most likely to look at where things like overhead can come down by continuing with some of the work that's happening now at a distance.
Great, thank you. That's great advice. Let's move on to maybe question 6. We kind of talked about experiences that you might suggest students do, like volunteering. But are there any types of classes that you would recommend them take, or maybe like a certificate program or something that you know of that would maybe set them apart or set them up for success in an industry like yours or at your organization?
I'm a huge advocate of, I call them feathers in your cap, right? Or tools in your proverbial backpack, right? Whatever extra credential or experience or skill you can add to that proverbial backpack can only help, right? It's never going to take away. So if you have the opportunity to get something, earn something, develop something, by all means do it. If you want to work with kids, you know, can you find a CPR training? Can you get certificate in some kind of, you know, child management type of topic? If you're looking at jobs that you think are going to be online and will take some tech skills, you know, can you get a Google certificate, or, you know, those kinds of things? There are lots of ways, especially in this time when we're at home, there are lots of things that you can do online, even free or super low cost, especially during the pandemic, with companies offering greater access to things. This might be a good time to pick up some feathers in your cap. But I'm a huge advocate of whatever you can do to help set yourself apart and continue to grow and learn. Even if it's not a tangible thing that's exactly used in your next gig, it could say something about who you are in terms of your character in your resume, that you're not someone that just stopped and stayed stagnant, but you continued to learn and develop and want to be the best you can be.
Any other maybe classes or certifications or anything? I think Renee pretty much did a good, well-rounded overview of everything. I mean, like you said, there's companies right now that are offering their services either at a low cost or free. So take advantage while you're home on doing an Excel, you know, certificate or something along those lines, or training.
Yeah, I would say just like with kind of the hard schools, kind of like what you touched on, Libby, but when I went to college, my Excel experience was limited to the statistics class I had to take, and I barely got through that. So I would say Excel and really the whole Microsoft Word or Office suite is something that you're going to use no matter where you are. If you can learn it on a Mac, on a PC, just feel comfortable with that because it's going to come up no matter where you are. Working in fashion for profit, I use Excel more than any other application. Salesforce, I highly recommend trying to find something for that kind of training as well. It's something that I keep coming upon wherever I am. So all of these tools are used differently at different places. However, having that rudimentary knowledge of just knowing which buttons do what is incredibly helpful.
Awesome, thank you. So now we're out. We have about 15 minutes left. I'll stop right there on the questions. I can pick them up later if other students don't have questions, but we can go ahead and open it up. If you guys have students and alumni that are with us, if you have specific questions for any of our panelists, now would be the time to ask. So feel free to jump in and ask some questions. And don't forget, most of you are muted, so make sure you unmute before you ask.
Someone just put in a chat, asked about where to find the feathers that I was talking about. So I put a couple of ideas just off the top of my head in the chat box if anyone's interested.
Great. Any other questions? If not, we can continue with what we have, but I wanted to kind of give you all an opportunity to ask questions.
I had a question. Hi, my name is Francesca. I'm going to be graduating from DePaul this coming fall. I had a question, I guess, specifically for Emily, but anyone can really answer. But I just had a question about kind of pivoting your career role. Because for me personally, like I have a lot of experience in a lot of different things. And I just wanted to know how you kind of sell a past experience that maybe isn't completely catered to what you're applying for, and like what techniques you use in interviews and things like that to kind of, you know, sell yourself to be able to transition into a new role.
I love that question. I'm so happy you asked that question because it's a tricky one. You know, like you heard before, coming from a very different background to go into nonprofit, I did a couple of things. I basically went through my resume and jotted down just a couple of different skills that I learned from each one. So, you know, I was interviewing for this event specialist role at the Red Cross, and in my past life in fashion, I had worked through countless fashion weeks. I was super organized. I could keep track of a lot of inventory, a lot of heads, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of how I transitioned that. And it's really just taking all of the specialized pieces of the background and really just boiling it down to what you learned from each thing, which is, it's tricky. I would recommend maybe doing it 2 or 3 times because I think that you'll like refine as you go. And then the big question that is really the purpose of every interview is, why are you the best one for that job? And one thing that I learned is just, you know, practice. My final interview for this role was actually in France. I was on vacation and they asked if I could call in for a quick interview. So at midnight in France, I had my 3 reasons why I was the perfect person for this role. And I had been practicing them through the streets the entire day, talking to myself essentially about what those things are. And it was just that I was passionate. I had the skills that were required for that job, and I was the best person, and I had all of the reasons listed. So if you can boil it down to those things, and I would recommend doing it with any interview, you're going to come across really strong, and the examples are going to be that background that you need, and you know, you might feel a little silly being like, oh, you know, like I'm interviewing for this job, but my prior experience was in something completely different. But a good employer is going to be able to see what you see, which is that your skills do transfer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, being able to articulate how those other experiences have prepared you for the role that you're interested in now, you know, that transferability, right? One of the ways when I was working at a university campus, by the way, Libby knows this, but I was in the career office and my nickname was Resume Renee. So when I was working with students on writing resumes, one of the questions I would kind of ask back to them when this particular topic came up was to have them think about how are they different because of that previous experience, right? Who are they now compared to when they started that other thing? And that might help you kind of get to the crux of your message, what it is that you've taken away from that other experience.
Thank
Hi, yeah, it's Chris again. And this might be specific to Miss Arel, because you do HR, and my career was predominantly in HR for over 20 years. So coming to DePaul, I'm switching to nonprofit. So I found it really interesting that that's here. Mine is almost flipped to what you've done. In regard to HR, do you feel that things are going to change as far as what you're looking for? How is that landscape kind of going to change? Because I'm expecting that there's definitely going to be some specifics that people are looking for employees to have coming out of this.
Oh, you're muted, sorry. There you go.
Even though we have put a freeze on our open roles, that is a great question, because I'm already thinking about, you know, when everything returns to quote unquote normal and we are ready to move forward and we do have a need. I think the inefficiencies that we have discovered just about our organization are going to be key in deciding what we look for in our next and our bigger and better and brighter individuals that we bring on. I think one word that sticks out for me is a person who is nimble, and actually a person that does have a vast variety of experience. We have found that a person who is much more well-rounded in their experiences, they're able to be they're more amendable, and they're able to be more nimble, and we can kind of throw them in any situation, and that's only a benefit for us. Also, they come with such great stories and experiences and things that they've done in their backgrounds that we often learn from. So I think we're looking for somebody, we will be looking for people who are more nimble, and because we don't know what the actual physical workspace will look like, I anticipate that a number of us probably will continue to do at least part of our jobs from home. And so people who have been able to embrace the technology that Renee was speaking about, you know, being able to use all of the new platforms for communication, for having meetings, in conjunction with and combining that with possible in-person meetings, or knowing how to plan and host virtual events, I think is going to be key. For HR specifically, for those types of skills, I think being able to stay connected to the full organization and what they're doing, and being able to support whatever strategy that's going to emerge is going to make you more valuable. So, you know, HR could be a lot of tactical things because it's heavily process driven, but if you can find a way to learn as much as you can about the operations of the business and the strategy, whether it's in the fundraising or the community part of whatever organization that you're working in, it's going to make you a much more valuable asset.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other specific questions from students? Give you another minute.
I have a question. This could go for anyone really, but we're talking a lot about like skill sets and like the kind of concrete things to do. In your jobs personally, when has there been a time like where it was kind of difficult and you didn't really know how to handle the situation, and how did that go, and like what kind of came about it, I guess?
Kayla, are you asking about particular job duties, or are you talking more about an environment like this time where the pandemic is happening and job hunting is hard?
I'm thinking more on along the lines of like your personal jobs and your personal work, like when you go into work and you encounter like a difficult problem. Like when has there been a time when you've encountered a difficult problem and it was like how did you go about doing it? Just like a story about your life.
Gotcha. Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind for me, again, I always worked with young people. So the first time I had to call DCFS was really, really hard. And just kind of second guessing if this was the right move. And so whenever I'm in that situation, when I'm nervous about making a move, making a decision, I always consult other people, go to my manager, go to my team, and get their feedback and their advice, which can in turn, and did in this case when I had to call DCFS, have their moral support and their emotional support. Really important, as you can imagine. That's a very emotional thing to have to problem solve.
Yeah, it's a good question. I have two examples. The more drastic one is I work in special events, and we're not allowed to have special events really anymore. You know, I was planning a 900-person fundraiser breakfast, and you know, I watched it go from like, you know, parties of 500 to parties of 100 to parties of 50 to parties of 10, and just like essentially watching that event just fall through my fingers. And so with that, you know, the first thing I did was I actually just wrote down a list of things that I thought we could do instead, because I just knew that there wasn't a way that we were going to completely like, it just wasn't going to disappear. And then from there, I was able to share that with my team. And, you know, thankfully I have pretty like-minded coworkers, so they came back with their own list as well. And we were able to kind of problem solve up into, you know, a couple of really cool virtual events. Something a little less specific though, usually when I'm faced with any sort of difficulty, I'm not really sure what to do, or I'm not really sure what to say. There's no shame in saying, I need a minute to figure it out. You know, I think that, you know, always have one person that you feel comfortable going to, if not more, with like subject matter expertise. And then if you do have a dilemma of that sort, I would suggest coming up with a couple solutions of your own, and just be like, this is a problem. Here are a couple of things I think we could do, but I wanted to hear what you think first. And that kind of makes it into more of a conversation where you can actually both move forward and hopefully come to a good fix quicker.
Yeah, I think Emily brought up a lot of great points. I totally, you know, double down on that. I think that's super helpful to use those avenues. I'll speak more broadly, and hopefully, Kayla, this helps answer your question. But I was just thinking, if you work in nonprofit social services and you work directly with people that are in need of any type of support, I think you're going to have days where, you know, maybe things aren't going well with the person you're serving. Some people use the word like clients, or, you know, youth or adults or whoever you're working for. And so what do you do in those moments where you've worked with someone for a couple months, you've built a great relationship, and for whatever reason they're not reaching their goals, or for whatever reason they've had a really chaotic or crisis-like situation happen to them, and how does that impact you? And we talk a lot about vicarious trauma in this type of field, and so I think that's just something that when those moments happen, they've definitely happened to me, is having those outlets when you leave work to make sure that you're re-energizing yourself and that you're taking care of yourself so that you can go back in the next day and continue to support the people that you're working for. So that's not a specific thing, but in terms of like, oh, that was my individual story, but that will happen if you do work directly with people. So making sure that when you have those days where, again, it could be something very traumatic even for you to experience through your client, being able to say, okay, what do I do when I go home to recharge my batteries and refresh to make sure I'm ready to go and that I don't experience, some people call it burnout, or just, taking on too much.
All right, that's great advice. Did you have something, Renee, that you were about to say?
No, I was just going to kind of piggyback off of what Kevin was saying, that another way that I've kind of trained myself to avoid that burnout word is looking for the thank yous. So thank yous are not always verbal thank yous, right? But particularly when you're working with vulnerable populations and children, does someone share with you? And if they did, that share is a thank you, right? It's a recognition of you being someone open, safe, comfortable to them. So looking for the thank yous in those tough times, in those stressful days, is another kind of way to keep your perspective and not just, want to pull your hair out on some days.
And I'll just add one last thing to that, is that you have to be able to own a mistake that you inevitably may make, and to forgive yourself for it and learn from it and be able to pivot to keep moving on. You don't want to dwell in the mistake. Most of us have made them. I've made them and have been just so devastated that I thought it would be career ending. And you have to take that moment to reassess, understand why you made the mistake, go back and learn from it, and put things in place so that you don't repeat it. And then that will help you moving forward. But nothing is ever too great that I've seen that you can't bounce back from, but you have to know how to work through it and not let it cripple you.
That's great, and a great question, Kayla. I think that's some really good, honest advice. That's awesome. So it's a little bit after 2 right now, so we'll go ahead and finish up the panel. Thank you all so much for being here and taking the time to share with all the students and alumni. I'm going to put my email in the chat for the students that are here. If you have any questions or wanted to follow up with one of our panelists, just shoot me an email, and we can see about coordinating or introducing, whether it's LinkedIn or email or whatever it is. So if you have any other questions, let us know. And thank you all so much for spending the time with us. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.